Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti. I am MrPhotographer.com. In this video, we're continuing our mini-series where I'm comparing several different software processing applications to Lightroom. In our first video, I compared Luminar 4 to Lightroom. In our second video, I compared On1 Photo RAW 2020 to Lightroom. And in this video, we're comparing Exposure X5 to Lightroom. In the last video of this series, which I'll do in a couple days, I'll be comparing Capture One version 20 Pro to Lightroom. Now, why am I comparing these applications to Lightroom? Well, for better or for worse, Lightroom's kind of the king of the hill. They still have the largest market share in post-processing software applications. So we're comparing these applications to Lightroom. And we're really not comparing the quality of the processing because they all process an image great. We're really comparing the features. And hopefully in these videos, it will help you decide which application would work best for you. Now in the description below this video, I'll have a link to a playlist which will contain all the videos in this series. Also, there'll be another video in that playlist. The other day I did a video where I actually processed a single image, the same image in all 5 applications, and you could download the processing I did as well as the raw file. So you could try to compare the processing that each of those applications did to the image, to the same image. Now, as far as Exposure X5, the company used to be called Alien Skin Software, and their product was Exposure. They had Exposure 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Very recently, they've changed their name to Exposure Software, so it's no longer called Alien Skin. It's called Exposure Software, and their current product is Exposure X5. So that's what we're talking about today. Now, to jump right into it now, finally, in the other applications we talked about so far, there were actual distinct modules. There was a digital asset manager module. That's like the library module in Lightroom. And there was a develop module. In Exposure X5, there really aren't any modules. The workspace is a hybrid workspace, which kind of contains everything so that you could just easily jump between like digital asset management tasks and processing the image without jumping from module to module like you would in Luminar and On1 Photo RAW 2020 and Lightroom. So as you look at the workspace over on the left-hand side, you could see that we have folders. And like Luminar and On1, you do not have to go through a formal import process to get your images into Exposure X5. You could just navigate to wherever they are on your computer and start processing them. If you do have images on a memory card, you can copy them off the memory card. Just go up to File and then down to Copy Photos from Card, and then the Copy Photos from Card dialog box pops up. And it's very simple to use, and it is very powerful though. So you could copy, tell it where to copy the images from. You could review the images, so you could deselect those you don't want to copy to your computer. You could say where you're going to copy them to on your system. You could rename the copied files, and you could apply metadata. So you could add your copyright, you could add keywords and other things here. So it is more powerful than the digital asset management module of Luminar, and it's about the same or maybe just slightly less powerful than the digital asset management module of both Lightroom and On1 Photo RAW 2020. So you do have the option to get images into Exposure X5 from a memory card. Now, it does not have tethered shooting built in, but what you can do is if you have a specific folder that you're going to be copying images from a camera into, you could right-click on it and you could go down to Monitor Folder. So what that does is when Exposure X5 is open, it's going to be continually monitoring that folder. And if any new images get put in that folder, they'll automatically show up on the screen, and they'll be in Exposure X5. So what you'd have to do is use any tethering software, a third-party product, or something that comes with the camera. For example, Fujifilm has tethering software available. So if you shoot Fuji, you would use Fuji's tethering software, monitor a folder in Exposure X5, and you'd be able then to basically shoot tethered as though it was built in. Now, Exposure X5 has collections, and they have quick collections, so you could quickly add things to an image, and or to a collection, I'm sorry. And they have a lot of presets that come with it built in. So there's a whole array of presets similar to On1 Photo RAW 2020 that come with it, and Luminar comes with a lot of looks. Looks are presets. It has history, so it keeps track of all your work as you go. It is, of course, non-destructive, so you're not going to be actually writing to the RAW file when you process your images. Now, it has flagging, and this is where I should mention that On1 Photo RAW and Luminar copied a lot of the keyboard shortcuts from Lightroom. So those of you that have used Lightroom, if you're going to move over to one of those two applications, the keyboard shortcuts are similar. Exposure X5 has their kind of own set of keyboard shortcuts. For example, right now we're in grid view, and in those other applications, to get in grid view, you hit the G key on your key. Here you don't. And then if you want to process the image, you could go like in Lightroom to the develop module, hit the D key. Here you don't. Here to go like to, and again, it's a hybrid workspace, so you're not actually jumping to a different module. But if you want to go in loop view, so you're just looking at the one image and you could process it over here on the right, you would hit the tilde key that also has like the accent sign on it. It's directly below the escape key on most keyboards. So when you hit that, you'll put the focus on that single image, and you could then process it over here on the right. If you want to go back to grid view, you would hit the escape key. And the reason why I'm bringing this up now is because you do have the full array of star ratings, color labels, and pick flags that you do in the other applications, except the keyboard shortcuts are slightly different in that as far as the star ratings and the color labels, there's the same. Use the number keys. The numbers 1 through 5 will give you the number of stars. 6, 7, 8, and 9 will give you colors, color labels. 0 will remove the star rating. If you have a 5-star rating, just hit 0, it'll take it away. But here's where it's different. The pick flags in the other applications, you hit the P key and the U key and the X key. Here, if you want to actually like pick an image, you would hit the =sign key. If you want to reject an image, you would hit the minus key. So it basically just carries along that whole number keyboard that goes across the top of most keyboards. So 1 through 5 are star ratings, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are color labels. 0, remove the star rating. Minus is reject the image. 0, pick the image. So you basically, you could argue is a better way. It keeps everything along that top row. And then it has powerful sort capabilities. Along the bottom, you could sort by your pick flag, you could sort by your star rating, you could sort by your color labels, or any combination of that of those attributes. As far as I know, and again, if I make any mistake, I leave something out or I misrepresent something, please correct me in the comments below. But as far as I know, you cannot like search by metadata. You can't search by like the camera lens you used like you can in On1 Photo RAW 2020 and Lightroom. So as far as I know, that cannot be done. Now, once you decide on an image and you want to work on it, so you hit that little tilde or accent key and you've got it focused. The workspace, again, it's a hybrid workspace and it is customizable. You could move just about everything around. So you basically have the main view screen in the middle, and then you have a panel on the left, on the right, and then the film strip along the bottom. And you really could move anything from panel to panel. So even if you want like all your editing tools over on one side and everything over on the other side, you could do that in preferences. So you would go to, on a Mac, to Exposure X5 down to preferences. I don't have the Windows version, but I think that's under the edit menu in the Windows version. And then you go to panels, and you can see how you can move these actual tabs that are in the panels all around. So you could customize the workspace for you. But let's say we just leave it the way it is and we're ready to work on it. You could make a little more room by closing down the panels with the little triangles that are on the left, right, and bottom. And then on the right, as you're looking at the edits, you can see we have layers. Now the layers here are more rudimentary. They're really not as powerful as On1's layers are. With On1, you could do luminosity layers. You have a lot of possibilities. On1 is more akin to Photoshop. This really just uses layers for the tools. And as you look at this, you can see that the bottom layer here, this is the actual image. And on this layer, I did basic processing, and I added some sharpening, and I think I did tone curve. Yeah, I did tone curve to that too. And I also, I think that's all I did, actually. Yeah, that's all I did to this image here. But then, as you move up the layers, you could see here I put a radial filter to kind of brighten up this area of the cliffs. Then up here, I put a graduated filter to darken the sky a little bit. Then here, I put another radial filter to brighten up the cliffs over here. And then when you click on each of those layers, the adjustments down here are for that layer only. As you can see, the basic adjustments here, most of them are right in the middle in 0. But if I go down to the actual image layer at the bottom, you can see the adjustments are for that layer. So that you could see how this works, the workflow involved here for the layers. And as far as these tools are concerned, it shows a brush, a band-aid, and the crop tool, right? Well, if we go to the brush, and let's look there, and let's just make a little more room so we could get a little better focus on the tools here. This really isn't just a brush. It's actually 4 tools in one. At the top, we have a brush, all right? So you could go up here and you could use the brush to brush in any adjustment you put down at the bottom, all right? So it's adding this to another layer. See, on new layer right here. Or if you don't want to use a brush, you have the choice of a radial filter, a typical graduated filter. This is the graduated filter that you see like in Lightroom, right? With the middle bar and the 2 on either side. They call it a planar shape. Then over here, you just have this other they call it a half planar shape. To me, that's like a third planar shape, but either way, you have that. So it's just graduating in one direction. It's not graduating below and above the center line. So you have these 3 different types of filters. You have 2 different graduated filters and 1 radial filter, as well as the brush. And again, when you have this little checkbox checked, it's going to put that adjustment on a new layer. So that is exactly what I did above. As you look at the layers, each of those was done on a different layer. And you also have a lot of control over the mask, how much you're feathering it, whether you're limiting the mask to luminance. It's not really a luminosity mask in the truest sense of the word, but you could control the luminance values that the mask will allow the adjustments to affect. The saturation and the actual hue itself. So you have a lot of control over the actual mask. So that's the little brush tool. Now if you go over to the little band-aid tool, this is a couple different like tools in one here. You have like the active spot and the brush. This is a little confusing when you first start using it and how you're actually process or doing these spot removals. What you're actually doing, it's really, first of all, I mentioned it's kind of 2 tools in one. It's heal and clone, similar to Lightroom, heal or clone. But what you do is, let's say there was a spot right here. I could press there, and it's similar to Lightroom in that it samples another area. So this is the active spot. Now I control this active spot here, right? So I could resize it, I could feather it, I could change the opacity of it. Then if I want to go to a clone tool, right, I go down here. Now this is still the active spot, this one. But if I put a clone tool over here and I clone, all right, down here. All right, now this one is active. So this now is the controls for that one up at top. So when you apply a new one, this bottom part is for the new brush. And then once it's applied and it's active, the top part is what controls it. And you can see there. Now, if I want to go back to this one, just click on it. Now that is active. And see, that's a heel brush. I'll click over here. Now that's a clone brush. See how we're popping between the two? So that is how you kind of control those brushes. Kind of, as I mentioned, kind of a little bit confusing at first maybe, but once you get the hang of it, it's super easy. And then, of course, you have a crop tool, the typical crop tool. Nothing out of the ordinary there. Now, as far as the actual adjustments you go, let's go back. Yeah, we're on the bottom layer. You have the basic adjustments and you have profiles. And you could see you could import profiles. So like Luminar, Lightroom, and On1 Photo RAW 2020, you could use the something like the X-Rite color checker to get a custom profile and a custom DCP profile. And with that DCP profile, then you could import it in here and you can make sure that your colors are exact for the lighting and situation you're photographing in. So that is a nice advantage there. Here you would switch between color and black and white. It has pretty much basic controls here: highlight, shadows, whites, blacks, clarity, vibrance, and saturation in the basic tab. It has typical sharpening and noise reduction controls, similar to what are in Lightroom. It has the basic HSL controls, similar again to Lightroom. It also has a color filter at the top. So if you want to, add like an orange filter to an image, you could do that here. You could see how that added the orange filter. So it has a filter here. So this is kind of like two tools in one. You have a filter, color filter, I should say, and then you have the actual HSL controls below that. You have a tone curve. You have LUT, so you have the ability to use a 3D LUT. Now that's the same or similar to Luminar 4 and On1 Photo RAW 2020. LUTs aren't available in Lightroom, so you can't use LUTs in Lightroom. There's your vignette control right there. You could do overlays. You could do borders. You could do light effects like light flares and things like that. You could add textures. So that is there. You could do some advanced focus techniques here with making certain parts sharpened and blur. And I actually have a video on this where I demo where this might come in effective. So it's another creative possibility that allows you to do something a little more creative to your images. And something like that is in On1 Photo RAW 2020. I don't believe it's in Luminar. And of course, it is not in Lightroom. Grain. So you could add grain to the image. IR, it's not your real infrared. It's more like a glow. So you could add a glow to your image. See how it's adding glow. And then it kind of gives maybe an IR look here and there. To me, it's a poor simulation, but that's my opinion. All right. So it has this IR tab. Has a bokeh tab, which helps you achieve bokeh, like an artificial bokeh to your image. And you could see that it has, for focus region, it has a similar controls that we had for up in this brush. You have the radial filter and two different types of graduated filters to help you do an artificial bokeh to your image. Now, lens corrections, I think where it kind of lacks. For example, this image was shot with a Nikon 70-200 version 2 lens, which is like one of Nikon's best-selling lenses. Every company has a lens correction for this lens, except Exposure X5. So if you go down here, you could drill down to Nikon. And then once you have the manufacturer as Nikon, you go to the model, and you can see that there's very few Nikon lenses here. So not available. It's just not in here. So lens corrections is an issue in my opinion. But in that regard, I think it's maybe I'm overly fussy. First of all, if you're a mirrorless shooter, it wouldn't apply to you because the lens corrections are built into the RAW file. And Exposure X5 will just read the RAW file. So you don't need an external lens correction like instruction for it to correct the distortions. It will be built in the RAW file. Secondly, is 99 times out of 100, or even maybe more than that, 99 million times out of 100 million. Well, that's the same ratio. 99, forget it. Anyway, my point is, you probably wouldn't tell the difference anyway, is what I'm trying to say. All right, defringe. So sometimes you get that purple or green, or fringing on an image. You could fringe it there. You have a transform tab so that if you're shooting, especially architecture and real estate photography, you could make sure that your corners are square. And it has the metadata tab down here at the bottom. So here you can edit metadata and you can add keywords. You also could flag and give a rating for an image and a color label for the image here. You also could do that when you're in that grid view. And to get in grid view, you don't hit the G key on your keyboard. You hit the escape key on your keyboard and you're in grid view. And you also could then give it a flag rating right here at the bottom by just clicking on the appropriate star rating, the flag, and whatever. And you could do that here. And again, it's available here as well. You can see I gave it 4 stars and a flag over here, and it's reflected over here. So it's a little different in a lot of ways than those other applications we've talked about so far. It kind of does things in its own way, but it is pretty efficient. It does a pretty good job. Now, as far as exporting an image, it has an export dialog. If you go up to File, down to Export, and it's pretty powerful. You could say where you're going to save it to, the folder you're going to save it. You could rename it. You could save it as a JPEG, TIFF, PSD, or just export the original file. And if it's a JPEG, of course, it has the quality slider. It has the color spaces. So you have, in this case, sRGB, Adobe RGB, and ProPhoto RGB, or just the original color space the image was in. Output sharpening, you could, low, medium, high, and whether you're exporting it to be printed on a matte paper, luster paper, glossy paper, or you could just go to custom and just move this slider here for output sharpening. Metadata, you have control of what metadata is included with your export, similar to Lightroom, and that there. And then resize, you could resize the image here and you could export it. Now, one thing I failed to mention with On1, and I apologize for that, is I didn't talk about the print module. There actually is a print module in On1, which I didn't mention. There is not a print module in Luminar. Of course, there is a very extensive and complicated print module in Lightroom. Exposure X5 has a print module as well. If you just go up to File and down to Print, you could see this comes up, and you could go down and you could control the margins, and you could see you get a preview over here on the right, and the grid of whether you're trying to print multiple images on one piece of paper, grid spacing, cell size, stuff like that. This is all similar things that's in On1 and in Lightroom as well, just cosmetically laid out different here. Match orientation as far as the zoom, your pixels per inch, or that's PPI, watermark. It has watermarking, so you could add a copyright. You could edit your watermarks, so you could create a new watermark and do that here. So it does have watermarking like Lightroom does, like On1 does, but Luminar doesn't have watermarking built in. I did do a video on a hack on how to create a watermark and get it applied to an image in Lightroom. And it has output sharpening for your print as well. So it does have a print module. Now, it does not have the map module, a book module, slideshow module, web module like Lightroom. But you can see it does a lot. It does things in its own kind of way. You could argue. So there might be a little bit of a learning curve, especially if you're into, like me, using keyboard shortcuts. Now, again, the masking is rather rudimentary, unlike On1 Photo RAW 2020, which really has powerful masking and blending option. It has blending modes. There's no blending modes here. So again, you know, it's a little closer to Lightroom in that regard. It's just putting actually your tools, your radial filters, graduated filters, your brush adjustments on individual layers with masks. And then it uses the same controls down below to edit those images. For example, if I go up to the graduated filter here, right? Now I click on this, I'm clicking on the mask, so I could control the mask here. If I want to edit the image, you click over here. And this is actually going to click, or it's going to edit the sky, all right? Because that's where I did the adjustment. You see, if I hover over the mask, it puts that red overlay, and that's where this adjustment is going to affect. And you can see that it's affecting the trees over here. Well, if I go to the mask and I go to like this luminance section, I could try to better dial it away from those trees. You could see how you could come in here with these little triangles and try to move it around so it's not affecting the trees up in here as much. So you could really control the mask of where it's affecting. And then again is when I'm over the image itself now, I could go like to the basic tab, and if I go down to like exposure, I could brighten up the sky. You see how it's just affecting the sky now? So that's how this masking works. So it is powerful for what it is, allowing you to apply these adjustments to very specific areas of the image. Kind of more similar to the way Lightroom does it, I guess, except with Lightroom, you never see a mask like this. You just have that red overlay, and that's it. And then if you want to go back to editing the entire image, click on the bottom layer, and then you could edit the entire image, for example. If I go here, you'll see it will, once it renders, see the entire image gets bright. So I hope that kind of made sense how that works. So that is Exposure X5. I think I covered most of the major features. If I missed anything in the comments below, please mention it. If I misrepresented or if I was just darn wrong about something, mention it in the comments below so we make sure that everyone has the correct information. And now again, I have one more video left in this series where I'll be comparing Capture One to Lightroom. I should do that in a day or two. And I'd like to thank everyone who watches my videos. I really do appreciate it. I'll talk to you guys soon.